and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. As Deborah said, it's my first time here. It is a remarkable place, as you all know. And I'm very happy to be here during this week that was so beautifully framed by Renee and Francis Collins yesterday morning in an exploration of music and what it can do in the world. So as Deborah said, I've been in this role for a pretty long time, a little over 17 years. And during that time, one of the central questions that has been a North Star for us is a seemingly simple one. What can music do? Music as an active ingredient in individual lives, in relationships, in communities, and then rippling out more broadly into the world. What can music do? That music seed was planted very early for me in my life. I grew up in a very rural place in northwestern Illinois, with parents who are artists, in a house without a television, with tons of books, and with lots of music. Music of many types: folk music, protest music of the 1960s, Western classical music. Music was always around. And when I was 10, I started to play the oboe. And that led me on a journey that was really about ensemble. The thing that I loved the most about the oboe was being in the center of the orchestra. As you probably know, the oboe is right in the center, and there is nothing like being in the middle of that sound and making a small contribution to that big, collective, extraordinary human endeavor. I went to the Juilliard School, and I then started to play chamber music, and that was another incredibly beautiful and compelling way of being with other people, making chamber music. But throughout that time, I always felt like I wanted the opportunity to make a more direct impact on the society in which I lived. And so that led me onto the management side of cultural institutions and eventually to this role that I have now at Carnegie Hall. I was hired in 2007 by Clive Gillinson, who is the executive and artistic director of Carnegie Hall. And it's my good fortune that Clive is a bit of a radical, actually, when it comes to the way he thinks about the work that I lead at the Hall. He centers and believes that education and social impact work, activating music in our community, is foundational to the purpose of a cultural institution. And so we've had a great time figuring out what that was going to mean together over all these years. The other thing about Carnegie at the time that I started was that we didn't really know. We didn't have a clear philosophy that was intended to underpin our educational work. We didn't know what the priorities were or what the goals were. And so we had the opportunity to figure that out. And we thought a lot internally. We sought a lot of outside perspectives from different people and different vantage points. And the other thing that we always had was the mission of the Hall. Because as you know, nonprofit organizations are guided by their missions. That tells us the purpose of the institution, and so I want to share that with you today. Carnegie Hall's mission is to present the extraordinary music and musicians on the 3 stages of our legendary hall, to bring the transformative power of music to the widest possible audience, to provide visionary education programs, and to foster the future of music through the cultivation of new works, artists, and audiences. So in my leadership of WMI, which is what I'll use to describe the Weill Music Institute, it just means the education department. In my leadership of WMI, I've thought a lot about that mission, and I haven't fixated very much on the visionary educations programs part of the mission. I figured that would take care of itself if we focused on the word transformative. And we've inquired a lot into that word. I'm very curious about it. I think it sets a very high bar. Transformative. It doesn't mean that we had a nice time at a concert. It means that our engagement with music has resulted in an evolution or a change in form. So when might that be most likely? Where might that be most likely? With whom? At what point in human development? Points, I would say, in human development. That word, transformative, has really been a North Star to us, and I'll come back to it as we go through the lecture this morning. So today I'm going to share a few programs that we've developed over these years and the impact of those programs. Before we get to that, I want to share one other frame or way that we think about and evaluate our work. And it came from Dr. Denny Palmer-Wolfe. She has been a lead evaluator with us for 15 years now. I hired Denny when we started to go outside of what we knew and understood, because I knew that I needed a critical friend, a thought partner, somebody who would observe things I didn't see, somebody who would bring hard questions to me and to the team, and Denny has been one of those people for us. And when we first started to work in healthcare settings and in justice settings, she said that we might be missing the point in the way that we were thinking about impact. She said, if you are in a healthcare environment and you only think about patients, if you are in a correctional space and you focus on the people who are incarcerated solely, you are missing a much more holistic way of thinking about what your program is doing in the world. And so she suggested this 360 degrees of impact. So yes, you have that original intended audience, the patient in healthcare, the person who is incarcerated. You have the artists who are doing this work in a sustained way over time. Might they not be impacted by that work? You have the staff at Carnegie Hall, the staff in a facility. How might seeing and supporting this kind of programming over weeks and months and years impact staff? Might it impact a place? What would a musical hospital look like? We had a hospital ask us that question. So how could this kind of programming sustained over time, how might it impact and change a place? And then she said, eventually, you have the potential for systemic change. And that's a big aspiration, but it's useful to know that that might be possible. So as I talk to you about some of these specific programs, maybe have that 360 frame in mind. It's been really helpful to us. I'm going to start by telling you about the Lullaby Project. Renee referenced it yesterday. Lullaby started in 2011, and it started at the Jacobi Medical Center in the South Bronx, which is the place that asked that question about what a musical hospital might look like. And we had been working at Jacobi for a couple of years when we were in a planning meeting, and the medical staff there started to talk about the maternal health needs they saw among their young pregnant patients. And what they said they were observing was that these young women who were experiencing a lot of stress often had a hard time with bonding and attachment with their infants. We know that attachment from a medical perspective is essential for the health and well-being of the mother, the child, and ultimately of the family. And when we heard about that, we wondered, what if those moms, caregivers, parents, had a chance to step out of that situation just for a minute and to center the hopes and dreams they had for their babies? And what if a creative process in collaboration with an artist might lead to a personal lullaby that mom, those parents could then take and use to soothe their babies, to soothe themselves? Might that help with the bonding and attachment that is so important? So we piloted the Lullaby Project at Jacobi twice in that first year. There were some beautiful songs written, and the team there at the hospital was very excited about what they saw happening. And before we knew it, people were asking us to bring Lullaby to other contexts, to different social service partners, different community-based organizations across New York City. And then we started to hear from folks in other parts of the country and the world, and they said, I hear about this lullaby project you have, I want to bring it into my environment. And so we started figuring out how to support people in doing that. All these years later, more than 4,000 lullabies have been written. We have 60 partners in 21 countries. Lullabies have been written in more than 20 languages, and we like to think about the Lullaby Project now as what we hope is becoming a lullaby movement. So, I'll ask you to help me with that in a couple of minutes. So there are multiple project models. It's quite a flexible program. Sometimes it's a single session that happens. Sometimes it's 4 or even 10 sessions that happen. But at its heart, what happens in Lullaby is that families collaborate with artists to write these personal songs. We have a whole bunch of prompts. Participants get this lullaby journal. One very popular prompt is to write a letter to your baby, and then that letter becomes the fodder for lyrics and eventually for music. Some people have very strong opinions about what they want the music to be like, even melodic contour, certainly style. But what Lullaby really provides is an opportunity for people to create highly personalized songs. These often reference other family members. They reference the culture that the participants come from, language of the participating family, and they're ultimately love songs. Some of them, so each participating family leaves with a simple recording of a lullaby, but then we also professionally record some of these in studio. And if you're interested in hearing some of them, we have a Lullaby Project SoundCloud, and you can stream them there. We also made an album with a lot of amazing, famous major artists. It's called Hopes and Dreams, the Lullaby Project. You can check that out too. So when we start to see momentum gathering around a program, I often like to ask, so why does this matter? What's at stake in this space? Should we really lean in around trying to figure out how to support and grow this work? So what's at stake in maternal health and early childhood? Well, 80% of brain development happens in the first 3 years of life. 80% of brain development. But that only happens if you have a healthy pregnancy and if you have a family that has stable, secure housing, proper nutrition, access to health care. In the United States of America, with our extraordinary resources, we are currently failing to provide young families with what they need in many situations. In 2015, which is the last time that this global State of the World's Mothers report was done, the US ranked 33rd in nations in relationship to a whole bunch of benchmarks that they use to think about the state of maternal health. Those terrible outcomes in the US fall disproportionately on people living in poverty. You will not be surprised to hear this. On families of color, and on people who do not have access to those essential ingredients: stable housing, healthcare, nutrition. So that's the bad news. The good news is that it's possible to change this. Positive change is possible through collaborative efforts that are happening in a lot of communities across this country. They involve diverse stakeholders, often public-private partnerships, who are focused on making sure that young families have what they need to thrive. We know from our evaluation that Lullaby and other similar projects can contribute in small and low-cost ways to that larger imperative. So, what are the outcomes that we see in Lullaby? It's important to note that Lullaby is a 2-generation approach, as I mentioned earlier. So you see impact on the baby and on early childhood, you see impact on the caregivers, and you see impact in the relationship. We have had many, many conversations and interviews with lullaby participants, and I'll go to a slide now to share with you one of the most compelling ways we've come to understand the impact of lullaby, which is this well-being framework. It articulates 5 pillars that are essential for well-being. They are positive emotions, meaning, achievement, relationships, and engagement. And when we code conversations with lullaby participants, they talk about their experience inside lullaby and their lives outside lullaby, you see a real disparity. So on this slide, those maroon bars are the inside lullaby instances of each of those pillars, and the greenish turquoise bars are the outside lullaby. And I'll just give you a few examples. So let's talk about meaning for a second. You hear people say things like, I want my child to know, after I'm not here anymore, how much I love her. And I hope that this song will mean that she will always know that. You hear parents say, they talk about the lullaby as a family heirloom. They say, I hope this is handed down to future generations, and those that I'll never meet, they have some tiny sense of me and my love for my family. So that meaning piece is really strong. Achievement. You have participants say, I didn't think I could write a lullaby. I had to be persuaded, but then the artist was so amazing and we started to write a letter and I realized I knew exactly what I wanted to say. And then I started to have opinions about what the melody should be like and what the vibe of the song, and I love my lullaby. I'm so proud of it. I've shared it with my family and my friends, and so people say things like that there's a real sense of pride and achievement. We see that lullaby also can really wake up creative capacity, and you'll hear that in the participant voice I'll bring into the session in a second. And then finally, positive emotions. I'll just say that when you look at the language people use to describe their experience in lullaby, it is vivid, descriptive, positive language compared to the way they tend to talk about their lives more broadly. So that well-being framework has been a really useful one to us. There's other research happening around lullaby. We're part of an NEA research lab that's happening in Philadelphia right now. There's been a tiny study at Columbia University, VCU, and research is a robust part of our big international lullaby convening that we do every year. So it's like a lullaby conference. You come to New York, people share methodologies. We have prospective partners there. We have current partners. And it's really a chance for the network to learn from each other, for all of us to get inspired and to share great music in the concert, which is the big culminating concert that features songs that have been written from projects around the world each year. So a number of years ago, relatively early actually, a dad wrote a lullaby with his wife, and they encountered the project as a part of their prenatal care. And he really loved his lullaby. And when he came back a month later for the next appointment, he said, I'm confused. He said, I was talking to my friend, whose wife is also pregnant, and I was so excited about my lullaby, and so I asked him what his lullaby was about. And he didn't know what I was talking about. And I was bewildered by that. I thought that this is just something that everyone does when they're getting ready to welcome a baby. And we thought, that's because it should be. So that has led us into this deep dive around how might we scale the Lullaby Project. And we have a bunch of ideas about that. But I'll just say, about the word scale, it's a business word, and I want to reclaim that word, and I want to ask, what is that word about? It is about providing more opportunities for something. What is lullaby about? It is about a highly personalized expression of tenderness and love. So how might we scale many, many, many more opportunities for people to get that highly personalized opportunity to express tenderness and love? So we have some ideas about that we're pursuing. If you have ideas about it, I would love to hear from you. Renee and Francis talked yesterday about getting health insurance, persuading health insurance to think about how to pay for some of the artistic engagement and interventions that are happening in healthcare. We've been exploring that as well, but other ideas too. Hey, major corporations, might we provide lullaby to our employees as a benefit when they're preparing to welcome children? And all kinds of other ideas. So if you have thoughts, I'd love to hear them. And now I'm going to bring a participant's voice into the session. You're going to hear from Alexis. This is an introduction she wrote about her experience before her lullaby, Song for Nico, was performed at one of the lullaby concerts. And I think that you'll hear some of the things I've been talking about well-being and some of those other impact pieces in what Alexis says in her introduction. This is Song for Nico. Let's play the video.
I am amazed by my experience with the Lullaby Project. When I was first approached to participate, I was struggling so much with mental health issues and physical health issues that I honestly didn't know if I could do it. But when it was framed to me as an opportunity to bond with my yet-to-be-born baby, I thought it was worth a try. Writing my lullaby ended up being a turning point in my pregnancy. I had spent the entire time feeling ill, anxious, and depressed. I couldn't believe I wasn't feeling any of the things a normal, expectant parent felt. Something must be wrong with me. But the songwriting session with John and Eleni was incredible. I was back. My creativity flowed. I was regarded as a co-creator, soon-to-be parent, but most of all, as myself. My husband and I played the song every night to Nico through my belly. I whispered the lyrics to him until the day he was born. And every day since, he's heard the song. It's the last part of our bedtime routine every night, and it calms him. Fast forward to my baby Nico being 7 months old and getting an email that my lullaby was going to be arranged and recorded by artists with the Lullaby Project. Through that process, hearing Nico's lullaby sung back to me, I realized for the first time that his song was also a song for me. The lyrics of Song for Nico echo, "I trust you." This process allowed me to find the words to share with Nico, but even more so with myself, a deep trust in the journey of parenthood, of growing, and of creating.
I trust you, you know what to do, and even if it's dark, you have the light coming through. Always remember that you can be tender, give and receive and lead with love. You can be open, you can be broken, you can be free, hold and be held. I trust you, you know what to do, and even if you feel alone, we're here with you. Always remember.
Thank you, Star Busby and the incredible teaching artists who support this work. That obviously those songs really get orchestrated for that concert, and check out the SoundCloud online. There are so many lullabies, and there are many beautiful ones. So I'm going to switch to a different program now. When I interviewed for my job at Carnegie Hall, I was asked to talk about a couple of programs I might be interested in starting at the Hall. And one thing I said was that I was very interested in musical work in correctional spaces and supporting compositional activity among people who are incarcerated, and as well as instrumental work. And so 15 years ago, when we started a whole range of new activities across different community settings, that included work at Sing Sing Maximum Security Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York. 15 years later, as you can imagine, that work has evolved enormously, and we have learned a huge amount. And I often talk about this work when I talk about Carnegie Hall's social impact programming, frankly, because it is so unexpected to people. It's surprising to them. And I think that expectations and assumptions are meant to be challenged. And I learned that the very first time I went to Sing Sing. I was there for a concert. I was standing in the back of the auditorium, which is a 400-seat venue inside the facility. And as the men came into the performance, a couple of them came over to talk to me. And they said, "Hey, what's the music going to be today?" And I said, "It's this wonderful group, Slavic Soul Party, Balkan Brass and Percussion Band. You're going to love them." And they said, oh, okay. And I said, "Why? What were you expecting?" And they said, "Well, it's Carnegie Hall. I mean, we thought it was going to be classical music." I said, "Oh, do you listen to a lot of classical music?" And they said, "Yes." One of the guys was like, "I love classical music. I listen to WQXR constantly. It is like my background, and it keeps me centered." And I just had this moment of realizing, ooh, Sarah, there's so much we don't know, and that we had made a ton of assumptions about a group of people. There's 1,600 people inside that facility, and that we had a lot to learn. So Musical Connections, which is the name of that program, is now a robust music workshop. There are 35 active participants in that workshop. They are composing all different kinds of music. One is working on an opera. There's a whole bunch of chamber music that's happening. There is rap. There is gospel. All different kinds of music. They're also learning to play instruments. And they have created a real musical community inside the facility. We produce 4 concerts there a year. At least 3 of those feature the work of the men alongside the teaching artists who come in. So we have a whole faculty of artists. They come in every other Saturday throughout the entire year with a break in the summer. And we also bring major artists into the facility for at least 1 concert a year. So we just had Arturo O'Farrell there about 6 weeks ago. At the beginning of this year, we collaborated with the Metropolitan Opera. We have been working with Joyce DiDonato at the facility for many, many years. She's been coming in for probably 10 years. And she and the Met helped us to bring Dead Man Walking into the facility with the men inside forming the chorus. If you want to hear about the impact of that work, you could ask your fellow Chautauquan, Stephen, who's involved in the opera program, Osgood, because he told me last night that the experience of Dead Man Walking at Sing Sing, he said, "I will never be the same." So ask Stephen about that. But 4 concerts a year. The rapper Common came in a couple of years ago. So it's a big, broad range, and those concerts are open to the broader population of the facility. Major artists, when they come into Sing Sing, they're invariably blown away by the level of musicianship among the men and the quality of compositions, and also by the environment. I was sitting in a concert just a few years into the program with Clive Gillinson, and he said, "You would never have an audience like this at Carnegie Hall." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, well, the quality of attention, which, by the way, I will say I notice here as well. It's quite remarkable. The engagement of this audience, it doesn't always happen at Carnegie Hall, right? People have their phones, they have their lives. They're there for a concert, but at Sing Sing, when there are so few opportunities to experience live music, people are focused when they're in the room, and there are ripples of response that happen. There's humor. You can feel that they're really attending to what's happening musically. So that's a beautiful thing about going to a concert there. But I want to return to the word transformative, because nowhere in our work is that impact clearer than it is in Musical Connections at Sing Sing. We know from personal journals the men have shared with us and from interviews with them that the participants in Musical Connections have built a musical community inside Sing Sing that has shifted the feeling of being incarcerated, contributing in powerful and positive ways to the men's sense of self. When they come home, we've had about 20 men come home. They continue to come to Carnegie Hall. They come on a monthly basis. They're part of our advisory council. They advise us on the programming. They also continue to connect with each other in this community that they have crafted. And they make music together. There's a band that's been made by some of those men. I also have 2 full-time employees on my staff who we met when they were incarcerated at Sing Sing. So when you think a tiny bit, thank you. When you think about that 360 model and you think about all of that impact, we have full-time staff we met when they were at Sing Sing. Kenyatta Emmanuel is an original member of the Musical Connections program, and I want to read to you what he shared with me when I asked him about the impact of Musical Connections in the lives of the men and in the facility. He said, "For people who are incarcerated, freedom is a negative state. It is a state of not having a restriction or constraint. We are free from something, from fear or danger or shame or guilt. When the constraint is absent, we may be free to be brave or confident, or be the fullness of our actualized self. But in art, in music, there is a positive freedom, an additive freedom. I am free to express in a language I did not have before, to express in a way that disregards artificial and ultimately futile attempts to stifle individuality, or to bury my voice beneath the Latin and high speech of an entire legal system. I am free to express in spite of the constant reminder that nothing I have to say is worth being heard. Marvelously, music frees me to sing of my captivity, to play my imprisonment in melodies that float through these dank halls to resonate with every human in hearing. Music makes me free to sing that our captivity is hard, the captivity of incarceration, or of expectation, or of family name, or assigned gender, or the color of my skin. Music infiltrates and sabotages all the ideas that steal freedom, that perpetuate captivity, and offers freedom that cannot be stolen or diminished or denied, the freedom of expression. About a year before Kenyatta came home, he told us that he had a plan for the day he was released. That on that day, he wanted to come directly to Carnegie Hall, and he wanted to perform a concert of music that he had written while he was incarcerated. He wanted to do that alongside his friends who had come home and the artists with whom he had been working over all those years. And we said, really? The day you come home, Kenyatta, you want to perform a concert? Like, don't you want to take a breath, lean into being with family? Don't you want to, like, look at the world? Don't you want to, maybe, would you want to rehearse a concert? in advance, coming to Carnegie Hall. No, he was very clear that's what he wanted to do. It was going to be called First Free Note. And we said, okay, we'll make it happen. So I want to share with you now just a couple of minutes at the beginning of a documentary that was made about Kenyatta's The Day He Came Home. This is First Free Note.
Hey, baby. I love you.
It's difficult to get comfortable. I think it's the pants. They fit. What's going on here?
Okay, here we go. Okay, Google. Navigate to Carnegie Hall.
Okay, Carnegie Hall.
I guess I'm waiting for a miracle. Yes, I'm praying that I hear from a God who I have to believe made us to be better than we've been behaving lately. I'm just reaching for a blessing, requesting a little help and answers to questions that maybe we should be asking ourselves, like, can't we agree there's something wrong if I feel the need to scream my life matters? And why in the world to you does that feel like an accusation? How many guns does one man need? How many children have to bleed and die before we concede? This math, it ain't adding up right, but I'm holding out hope that this is all some passing temporary insanity. I'm holding out hope. Deep inside we'll recognize our common humanity. I'm holding out hope. The way things are is not the way that they have to be. No, I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope. I'm holding on to love, holding off despair, and I'm holding out hope.
Kenyatta is an amazing person. If you go back to that 360 degrees of impact, you see those artists up there with him, teaching artists. You see men who had come home previously. You think about the place, this rippling impact that we see happening. So one final project I'm going to briefly share with you. As you can see, our work is highly responsive to the environments where we're designing programming, and also to the world around us and what's happening in it. This next project that I'll share, the Wellbeing Concert Series, emerged during COVID, and it came from conversations I was having with a colleague about how unwell everyone seemed to feel. Separate from the public health crisis, we've learned a lot about how loneliness has impacted us, how the isolation continues to ripple out, how our saturation in screens and technology, while extraordinary, may not have helped our sense of being okay in the world. And we wondered, what can music do? Is there something we could do with music that would help people feel more connected, that would help people set aside technology, check in with themselves, have a beautiful musical experience? Might that be useful? Might that be supportive? And so we designed the Wellbeing Concert Series. In the first season, the pilot season, it was mostly for employees of the public health system in New York City. But then we've opened it up and we have public audiences and all kinds of folks coming to them. I'm going to show you a video because I think it's the easiest way to give you a sense of the environment of these well-being concerts, and then I'll talk a little bit about their impact. So this is the well-being concert series.
When I think about well-being, mostly I think about being present. What does it mean to be where I am? Letting go of what's out there and letting that wall, that invisible wall between the inside and the outside start to disappear.
Here, from the beginning, there are no walls. We're in a circle. And if a chair is uncomfortable, you can lie on the floor. If you want to sit on a meditation cushion, you can.
Over about 15 years now, we have been working across a very broad range of settings. In healthcare settings, schools, in correctional spaces. So as we've been doing that work with our musical goals and our learning goals, we've also started to see that there are major well-being benefits that can emerge from musical engagement. And all of that learning over these years has fed into this new well-being concert series.
The Well-Being Concert Series is built upon an evidence base. We know, for example, that listening to music can reduce depressive symptoms, can reduce anxiety, can improve one's sense of well-being. Engaging in live music experiences in a group can be very helpful in terms of reducing biases and stereotypes. It can help one feel more engaged and socially connected.
We don't realize what we need. To just take that moment of breath, to step away from it all. Just let it go.
I think at an individual and family level, conversations around well-being need to continue to become everyday issues, not stigmatized or pushed under the rug, but just a normal part of expressing ourselves as human beings and as connected people.
Carnegie has a wide reach, and I think one thing about the well-being concerts that I find really beautiful is it's Carnegie using that name for perhaps one of the most important things that exist in the world. Like this idea of like being human.
We know that it might not have been easy to get here. Subway rides, traffic, competing obligations, a whole life lived up to this moment. And yet, you are here.
I believe that the Well-Being Concert Series came from a felt awareness that we're all in a difficult space. We do have data to suggest that as a nation, we're really struggling with our sense of well-being, our sense of mental health, and maybe in particular, a sense of isolation and loneliness, which is probably an echo and a repercussion from COVID.
One really beautiful moment in a concert, the host had invited people to greet the folks around them. And then towards the end of the concert, there was a quiet moment, and then the host said, I want you to think about that person you greeted, and I want you to wish them well. What a balm it feels like to be invited to wish someone well. Thank you. So, you will not be surprised to hear that we're trying to understand the impact of this series, and we're actually working with somebody who's speaking here next week, Dr. Keltner. We just wrapped data collection on a randomized controlled trial looking at the emotional impact of these concerts on folks. But also, I'll share an anecdote from an artist. Kenan Azme, the wonderful Syrian clarinetist, said to us that the experience feels very different performing in a well-being concert. And he said it reminded him of the little town where he grew up in Syria, where there was a town square. And he said musicians would come to the town square and everyone would gather. And it was this deeply communal experience of live music. And he said, I didn't know most of the people who were in this concert, but it felt like a town square to me. So we really love that idea. And I'll also say, I joke with people sometimes, I really didn't make the well-being concerts for myself. No, really. But boy, do I benefit from them. All of us who work on this series, we get to come together and have conversations about how to be mutually supportive, about how to center wellness and care and relationship, and that has an impact on us as well. So I talked at the beginning about the mission of Carnegie Hall. The mission statement articulates the purpose. So what is the purpose of a concert hall in the 21st century? I've shared a few examples, and each of the things that we do is another response to that. What's the purpose of this institution? We do a lot of different things. I'll just say we do a lot of work in schools. There was a brief conversation about music education yesterday that is incredibly important. We do a lot of work with young artists. We're about to welcome 700 young people from 5 continents to Carnegie Hall tomorrow for the beginning of this enormous youth ensemble festival called WOW, or World Orchestras Week. So it's a big, broad range of work that we do. And in all of it, we think about that word transformative. So it's taken us in all of these rich directions. And I really think that the purpose of a concert hall is to be a public health partner. I think it's a vehicle. It can be a vehicle for connection and for healing. It can be a place to voice hopes and dreams, and also to share suffering and grief. An evaluator was looking at Lullaby that was happening in a refugee camp in Athens, and she said the Lullaby had the potential to be a portable sanctuary, that a family could write a lullaby having gone through a horrifying set of circumstances which led them to leave their homes, not knowing where they would end up, and being in between, and create this personal song that's light and easy to carry. All you need is your voice that could be sung day after day, and that could create this little feeling of home. Portable sanctuary, I love that idea. So what can music do? Over these years, I've watched musical engagement and creative work build confidence and a positive and often very different sense of self in young people and adults in crisis. I've seen music transport incarcerated people to a different place mentally and emotionally, a place of joy and peace, a place far from their physical environment. As I've shared with you through music, I've seen a group of adult men build a supportive, nurturing, and durable community together inside a maximum security facility, which, believe me, is not a place that lends itself to supportive communities. I've seen that community last, as many of those men have come home and continue to come together at Carnegie Hall to make music and to connect. I've had a commissioner of a New York City agency tell me that he needs to infuse music and art into the citywide probation offices because it is the best chance he has to get his staff of probation officers to see their clients, young people, differently, to see them for their talents and interests and abilities, not just for the risk they might present to society. I wonder what would happen if even a quarter of the probation and corrections officers in our system of mass incarceration had that opportunity to see their clients differently as people. I've watched engagement with music and art make space for people to develop hope, to imagine positive futures for themselves and their families, to experience deep connection through shared experiences, to create beauty, and to be proud of what they've created. We know that hope, a sense of community, feelings of accomplishment, and meaning in our lives are all essential for human thriving and our sense of individual and collective well-being. So what can music do? I'm continually inspired and humbled by what music can actually do in individual lives and then rippling out into the world, into places, and maybe even into systems. The challenges we face in 2024 in this deeply divided time require complex, collaborative responses. And I hope that people will increasingly see that music can be a powerful contributor to the solutions we need. Thank you.